We're going to start with Josh Bazin's question, but I am going to rebuke him here quickly. Talking about James Franklin, he says everything is coach speak right now, so wording is meaningless right now in college football. Okay, so we won't do a show. We just won't talk about it, even though like that's a thing that most people want to see or hear or talk about. So like let's just not talk about what James Franklin has to say. He does ask a question here in the chat though. Josh says, "Who's going to be the tight end in the middle of the T formation?" I think this is a great question. Nate, this is a very important formation to Penn State fans. I think it's a very innovative evolution that Penn State went through last couple of years. Brenton Strange was a huge part of that. A huge part of that. He is gone now. I'm putting the Bennett Tyler Warren. Do you have a counter offer for who's going to be in the middle of the T formation? And do you think that they'll be able to replicate success there without a guy who was an above average blocker, an exceptional lead blocker, specifically in Brenton Strange?
Good question. I don't. Tyler Warren makes sense to me. I feel like we've seen him in that H-back kind of role previously, so I don't see why not. Ty Howell, I did ask, and this may be relevant to the conversation here, but Ty Howell, I asked him what makes each player unique between Theo and Tyler, and he basically said that they're much more alike than they are dissimilar. Like they share a lot of the same qualities. He said that Tyler's, he called it his superpower, was like catching the ball, like just high pointing the ball and making
contested
plays.
Contested
catch is that is his special ability. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily have an opinion on where they should go, but I think Tyler Warren makes sense. And it in terms of the blocking and what that role needs to be able to do in that formation. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I would put that as a huge question going into the season of, can somebody replicate that and live up to that as this season goes along?
Do you think, so this is another question I want to get into about Tyler Warren, because this has been a fascinating thing. I've been on the Tyler Warren train for a while because of those high point catches, like just seeing him in practice, moss a dude with relative ease. But the consistency has not been there. Injury is a part of that conversation, though. So how are you viewing him in terms of, like, we talked about this tight end 2 versus wide receiver 3? Like, can he do it? Like, do you think that he is a guy that we have overhyped, or is he a guy that has been injured and things have been preventing him from being that guy, including, by the way, not being on the field as much as the other two?
Yeah, I hate to predict injury proclivity, whether or not somebody has an issue with that, whether it's repeated or not. So I don't know. I mean, I think that certainly you've seen the flashes to think that it's a seamless transition into, like, Brenton Strange being gone. You would think, if you didn't know about Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren, you would think, oh, well, there's going to be a step back there. But in a lot of ways, I think the conversation this offseason became, oh, well, hopefully Brenton Strange does go, right? Like that was the fan sentiment, was hopefully Brenton Strange does go so that these other guys have this opportunity and you don't lose one of them moving forward. So I did want to mention, because I was blanking on it. Theo's superpower was how well he runs.
I wanted to guess and see if I was right, but just a vertical passing game, like absolutely his superpower. And that's going to be an interesting evolution, because Brenton Strange, like just talking about the tight end position, Brenton Strange was the play action guy underneath routes and getting yards after the catch. Theo Johnson, if he wants to be he's got the physical talent to be a first round tight end, from all of those things. The blocking, he improved at the end of last year. I have to keep remembering that, because he did really kind of come on at the end of last year as a blocker. There's no reason he can't be a complete tight end. And then my question is going to be, is he going to take a lot of those underneath routes, or is Tyler Warren going to be that guy? One thing I want to talk about with Josh as a follow-up, he says, I thought Tyler Warren as well, but is Jerry Cross the third tight end? One thing you talked about, kind of out of sight, out of mind for the two top tight ends, things did not go well for the rest of the tight end class in the spring. The comments and some of the things when you asked James Franklin about, like, the rest of the tight ends, they were not good. Like, they were not glowing. He had some kind of tangential conversations about effort, and no one cares if you're not getting enough reps. Go and do it. And so, Jerry Cross, what I've seen from him in the blue-white game the last 2 years, I'm not really expecting him to be a part of this. I would say, like, Dinkins is the other guy, right?
It's Dinkins. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dinkins actually has very positive feedback. He is a guy who needed a year to kind of get into that, make that transition from high school receiver. Again, Ty Howell, we talked about this.
Yep.
A lot of these guys don't even play tight end in high school. Like, they'd never
Yep.
play the position. So he said that he always offers advice to spend time in high school with the offensive line coach, because so many of these guys don't do anything remotely close to it. They're either the quarterback because they're one of the best players on the field, or they're a receiver. And so you don't, you just, it takes some time usually for a true freshman tight end to get into it. But Khalil Dinkins has had that. He had that last season. He had that opportunity, was able to do something with it. Made a couple of plays here and there, had a touchdown. And so given his trajectory, I would very much expect him to be the third tight end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then the wild card here is Andrew Rappleyea, coming in as a mature freshman. I think we've chronicled that pretty well. Fitz and I have talked about that quite a bit, of what we very glowing about what Andrew Rappleyea can do for Penn State. But the question is, like, can he get up to speed in time? And is there, even for a physically developed young man, is there a transition to college that he can overcome without being in the spring? And that's the biggest wild card to me, is like, does he leapfrog some of those guys? So even though, like, we haven't really talked about Mega Barnwell leaving the program, Joey Schlaffer, Chuck Losey talked about how much of a stride he's made, but that's also being that he was so far behind from a physical standpoint. Penn State is still fine at tight end. They still have a lot of depth and talent. But really, it's going to be those three guys at the top for sure. So great question to start us off. Let's get on to something else, though. This one I want you to answer. Outside the BWI preview, of course. Do you read any of the preview magazines? And so, if so, which ones are your favorites? Nate, when does the preview magazine come out first? And then answer the second part of that question.
Yeah, so our preview magazine comes out in July. I wish I had the date in front of me. I don't. I promise I'll answer that next week. It's the middle of July is when it comes out. I want to say like July 15th or July 13th. So do I read ours? Yes, absolutely, cover to cover. I trust our insight. It's funny that this question is here. I encouraged our network to share some post-spring thoughts with each other, so that we don't necessarily have to rely on those preseason magazines. Because while Phil Steele, I do think is something of a great reference material, it's almost like my eyes glaze over because it's encyclopedia type reading. Like, you're not, there's no storyline to it. It's no
a fire hose
narrative.
of facts, which is what
fire hose of fact.
Yeah.
I do think it is often better than some of the insight that you're going to glean out of an Athlon or a Lindy's. And they're fine. Like, look, I don't hate on any of the preseason material, because I do think that you can glean nuggets occasionally. And especially for me, like, I mean, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, but if I'm learning anything from any of the national publications about Penn State, then I'm not doing my job very well. And so I don't learn about Penn State. What I do learn is it gives me a snapshot of the other teams on the schedule for Penn State.
Yep.
Right.
Because absolutely.
Because I like, genuinely, I don't know those things. I don't know what Ohio State has coming back. I don't know about Michigan. I don't know about Indiana. Right. Like, so any of those teams, it is a good resource, especially in the summer months when things are a little bit toned down, a little bit slower, to be able to catch up and get that knowledge base.
So let's get to our next question. What are your thoughts on Penn State not having a single protected rivalry game for the future schedules? Nate, journalistically, do you care? Do you think that that's an interesting note that Penn State has been #unrivaled, and now they literally don't have a protected rival?
Yeah, I think it is overwhelmingly to Penn State's benefit to not have that type of a game. Look, like if you're Ohio State or Michigan and you're one of the fans of those programs, okay, like I get it. That's a game that you want to see every single year. Take your fandom out of it. It is unquestionably a competitive disadvantage for those teams to have to face each other every single season.
Yep.
Like not even close. So, yeah, like if Penn State and Rutgers was a rivalry, and sure, the fan bases can get heated sometimes, but like if that was a protected rivalry game, then maybe fine. That would have been something of an advantage for Penn State. But I think to not have one and be the only Big Ten team that doesn't have one is much more skewed to the positive than it is to the negative for Penn State.
Yeah. It is a fascinating situation because every other team has rivals and some have multiple. So from a narrative standpoint, Penn State having none is interesting and unique. And as from a competitive point, I think you make a great point. Tom says he's going to use a fire hose of facts in the meeting at some point. That is free to use. I endorse you using that.